Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is the Eve Universe Show! New Intaki Stargate opens as Federation and State consolidate positions around Warzone. New Eden News, December 8th, YC124. New Stargate from Intaki to Amignon opens alongside Federation Navy Station. Intaki, Placid. The Gallente Federation has completed construction of a new Stargate in the Intaki system that connects the territory newly liberated from militia warfare with the high-security Amignon system deep in Gallente region of Verge Vendor. The Federation Navy has also completed and opened a new station in orbit of Intaki Prime. To accompany these changes, the Federation government has formally registered a system security status change from Point 1 to Point 2, and formally registered for navigation purposes the fifth planet of the system as Intaki 5, Intaki Prime. Federation security officials have indicated that they intend to continue working to raise the security status of the Intaki system, and President Silas Agard's government has officially declared that the low security of the Intaki People's Home system is a, quote, federal emergency, end quote, that requires continued direct intervention. Intaki autonomy activists and a significant minority of Intaki assembly members continue to protest the ongoing presence of Federation military and security forces in the system, and in particular on Intaki Prime. There have been considerable disquiet on the planet over the presence of Federation Navy Office internal security forces and number of counterterrorism and anti-sabotage operations by Federal Marine units. Intaki and Gallente politicians and protesters in the wider Federation also remain vocal in their opposition of the state of emergency and military presence in the Intaki system, focusing their ire on what they claim are breaches of the Federation Constitution and treaties with the Intaki. Senator Suvio Belleron, representing the federal sub-district covering the city of Lenokia on Intaki Prime, has continued to be vocal in his opposition to the Intaki system policies of President Agard's administration, though his stance has been met with skepticism due to the history of central interventionist politics and social and economic policy. Senator Faron Shu, a longtime foe of Belleron, representing the Yinmei home planet of Chandali in Lursatan system, was notably acerbic in comments with on the apparent shift. Quote, "The whole federal Senate knows that Belleron is an opportunist whose ambitions is only matched by his appetite for imposing his worldview on others. We now see clearly that Belleron is happy to stamp his cultural values on anyone who isn't Intaki, but is also keen when it comes to his grip on the political power base on Intaki Prime being threatened by the sensible security policy of President Agard." Caldari State solidifies presence in Syndicate with 3 Navy stations in DS-TAC M4Q constellation. UM-TAC Q7F Syndicate. Caldari State forces establishing a new protectorate in the Syndicate's constellation of DS-TAC M4Q has completed their major military infrastructure construction efforts and opened 3 Caldari Navy stations in the K-TAC NJ, T-TAC LIWS, and UM-TAC Q7F systems. Caldari Navy forces have also been enhancing their garrison fleet presence and has built up security outposts guarding the approaches to the constellation. The DS-TAC M4Q constellation was transferred to the Caldari State Sovereignty by the Intaki Syndicate as part of the arrangement on mutual defense and security cooperations crafted in response to the Federation's intervention on Intaki and 10 other Placid region systems. Federation authorities have continued to view this as an internal matter for the Intaki Syndicate, although there are reports of increased federal intelligence and Navy scouting operations in the wider Syndicate region. The Caldari State has reportedly increased its trading position with the Intaki Syndicate, agreeing a new preferential status for the Intaki Bank and giving Intaki Commerce access to certain state markets previously restricted to Caldari Corporation. It is also reported that the Caldari Navy and Intaki Commerce has signed a logistical agreement allowing the Syndicate's commercial arm to ship goods via naval jump navigation routes in return for local supply support for state operations in the DS-TAC M4Q constellation. In other news, Executive General Heike Torigo briefs Caldari Chief Executive Panel on status of Othanoon 5 research program. Intense clashes erupt as struggle for Aldranet system involves major battles across frontline with Avalon and Nenemelia. Republic fleet engineering teams reportedly to have, quote, safely recovered critical materials, end quote, from Egmar and Vard transmuters. Heavy fighting in Carmonen and Kamela as conflict rages over key front lines of Amar Mimitar warzone. Commodity and stock market reacts favorably to news of rare ore discoveries made by Upwell Consortium corporations. Quaife Company fends off increasing criticism in Gallente Federation over role and syndicate and ties to the Caldari state. Gris's pirates raid outlying Caldari Navy installations and convoys in Placid and Syndicate regions. Angel Cartel raids mining colonies in Asalem 4 amidst rumors of new discoveries following expansion of mine workings. Gang warfare flares up in Pegalar Constellation as competing smuggling and organized crime groups shift away from Veriat. Concord and Edencom officials reported meeting to discuss proliferation of Triglavian stellar transmuter technology. And that is it for your New Eden news on this December 8th, YC124. Now for some analysis. So, first of all, a couple of things to note here. There have been some people that have been talking about how this gate isn't really that important, especially since the fact that In Taki and a bunch of the other areas in the systems in that area have been taken out of the war zone. However, there is something that is worth paying attention to, which is the fact that this whole increase in security status thing, right? So it has gone from 0.1 to 0.2, and it seems that President Celis Agard has intent to continue to increase that. So it is very likely that when this is all said and done, Intaki will be a high-sec system. So that's number one. Now, why is this important? Well, as I discussed some time ago in the video, the Ugali situation. Hold on. Which I will try to link down below. The system of Ugalis is very likely the actual target of all of this operations, right? Some precursor artifacts potentially related to an ancient artificial intelligence has been discovered in Ugalis and was recovered by Concord's Derail Unit and Lydai Protection Services. Now, Ugalis is currently under control of the Gallente, but Ugalis itself is within 2 jumps of Intaki. So it's very, very possible, and I've been suggesting this for quite some time, that the reason why they are reinforcing Intaki is so they can properly control Ugalis. Now, this is further kind of reinforced by this note down below, which says gang warfare flares up in Pegalar Constellation, because the Pegalar Constellation is the constellation with Ugalis in it. So in other words, now that the issues with the Verret system, or the constellation, has been handled, and Intaki has been secured, things are being moved into and around the Ugali system, which hints to me that it is very, very likely, or at least very possible, that the next step is to this whole faction campaign is going to be taking it there. I strongly believe that the Ugali system is going to be absolutely critical to the upcoming shooters plot, right? Because the shooter is related to the other and war clones and precursor stuff through that, and therefore the relationship between that and Ugalis cannot be underestimated. They did bring in Kirkland Kirkland Risk Control at one point, which is a paramilitary organization, and we also see a lot of other paramilitary organizations involved in this. When you read gang warfare flares up in Pegalar Constellation as competing smuggling and organized crime groups, you should really read Guristas and Angels versus the Deathless. It is very likely that this is just further operations of the Deathless. They would be at least one of the competing smuggling and organized crime groups. And And they have done a lot of conflict with the Guristas specifically and Angel Cartel. Therefore, that's why I suggest that that could be the what they're exactly referring to. Now, in addition to that, this whole politics thing may seem to be kind of out of the blue, but if you understand who these people are and what they represent, it really makes sense. So Senator Suvio Belleron has been a senator since at least YC113, which is 2011. He introduced I think he's twice attempted to introduce a bill that ends capital punishment. The Intaki are very peaceful people. They are very, very close to like almost like a Buddhist kind of philosophy. They believe in reincarnation and, you know, non-conflict, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it makes sense that he would be pushing for an anti-capital punishment bill. He got it passed through the Senate just before the election. Well, not just before, but a little bit before the election. But Roden sat on it and didn't sign it and didn't act on it until the election was over, allowing the next president to make the decision. Well, the next president was Celis Agard, and she sat on it until the Stargate construction project happened, in which case the Intaki the Intaki delegation of the Senate supported her infrastructure bill and thus allowed her to pass her agenda while still vetoing Suvio Belleron's bill. It's really interesting because Senator Suvio Belleron is from Intaki. He is an Intaki representative. But at the same time, as the Belleron bill was coming together, there was actually literally a fist fight between Belleron and the reborn senator from Intaki, where the reborn senator punched Belleron in the nose. So obviously there's been a lot of tension involving this, but the fact that Senator Belleron calls out Celis Agard doesn't surprise me even a little bit, right? He does not like Celis Agard. On the other hand, Celis Agard is actually from... she is Yin Mei. She's from the Chandeli system, and her whole thing is about supporting the boundaries of the war zone, or of the Gallente Federation. If you look, like, in one direction from, you have the Yin Mei home world of Chandeli, and on the other direction you have Intaki. So there's always been kind of this resonance between the two in that sense, and so it really makes sense that the Yin Mei's representative would be supportive of Celis Agard and against Belleron. This is just classic politics right there. It is also worth noting that the Civil War, the end of the Civil War in Chandeli, was the first indication of the Deathless's team. It was the Deathless that pulled his team off of Chandeli to end the Civil War, citing not conflict of interest, but non-compete clauses, likely with the Federation. So there's some weird connection between all these things that we haven't quite sorted yet, but this seems to be another chapter in that whole story. Okay. Next, the syndicate buildup, I think, is really interesting. There is a lot of rumors that that this could potentially bring the syndicate into faction warfare. Now, the question is, if that happens, will they remain as nullsec or not? You know, having a nullsec region of what happened to the Intaki Holy Leader kid that they discovered a while back? The reborn Idama. Last we heard, the Intaki attempted to rescue him from, or her, I can't remember, from the Khanid slaver ship and failed. However, that plus the attacks that happened at that time is what led Khanid to work with the paramilitary organizations in order to attack Intaki, or back in like 2018, which is how Laidai got on there and looted it and took all of the tech that would later become the subcranial nanocontroller. So the actual state of that Idama is unknown past that point, as far as I know. Any rate, so the thing is that the Intaki system has changed its security status, but the Syndicate region has not, or at least this constellation has not. So the question is this going, where is this going to go? Is this area going to become part of faction warfare? Is it not? How are we going to impact it as it goes? How are these developments going to be to continue? And we're just going to have to keep an eye on there. But it's very possible that these pieces are going to come together in the next faction campaign. Now, I don't personally expect the next faction campaign until next year, because the winter holiday starts next week, and generally speaking, CCP likes to put on the winter event and then go on vacation. So the likelihood of them like doing new crazy stuff in December is relatively unlikely. They could have things primed up for January. January is usually a quiet month because of the fact that they take a break in December. However, we see, like, for instance, with the Dragonar Blitz event and the introduction of the Nirvana implants, that if they have something prepared already, then of course they can come out in January. And what's happening now is stuff that they've prepared for quite some time, it would seem, at least on some level. So I would expect that the next faction campaign would start likely next month, but we'll have to see. Yes, the Doctor Who event was also in January or February, but again, that was an event that was worked on for over a year. So, January is one of those interesting times where it's a nice quiet window for them to put something if they have something, but they're more than willing to not have anything, I guess is what I'll say. So, a couple things to note here. First of all, the Intaki Syndicate and Intaki are obviously very closely connected. The Intaki Syndicate also has the Intaki Bank. The Intaki Bank is connected to Upwell. The Intaki Bank is the Upwell financial branch, basically, which is interesting. Because as we were talking about events stuff coming up, one of the things I was talking about was the Easter event, right? The Garistas Hunt event. Last year's Easter event, we got introduced to Haika Torigo, right? Or is that the Caldari girl? Hold on. No, Haika Torigo is the Caldari leader. Then it's oh my god, I can't remember her name now. Either way, the Tanuki, the Garistas operative, was... we got her records last year during the Easter event. And that's the same time in which the Intaki peace treaties were being discussed and were disrupted by the Deathless's agent, which is... God, I can't remember anybody's name right now. The Garista, the Gallente Senate member operative who ended up being the double agent for the Deathless. Well, we can just look it up where I was going to go look at anyway. So what's interesting about that, though, was that it reminded me to go look at the records that we got from her from last year, and man, let me tell you, there is some interesting notes in some of these things. All right, so like, for instance, I mean, like, obviously we knew that they're interesting at the time, but now that we know everything that we know in the last since then, it becomes even more poignant. And at least at one point, it really feels like a turn to the camera wink kind of situation. that would be so we have the fact that she was working on spying on a project called Project Firebird, which was the Caldari attempts to refit and the dreadnoughts and potentially develop the Phoenix Navy issue. This information was stolen by the Guristas as part of the Easter event. And so that information is in the hands of the pirates now, which is why we could definitely see some potentially like new pirate capital developments, maybe a rebalance or something, for instance. Peacock, that's his name. The Peacock is the contact. So in this first one, she's talking about Akimaka Saraki, which is the CEP chairman, that basically the de facto head of the state. And she's accusing him of being, well, not in this one. She's just saying that he is no fool and we must keep a close eye on him. In this one, in 2, she refers to the fact that Peacock has some dirt on Oveg Dursk, which is the head of Sorrow, the black ops, basically, of the Concord. In number 3, we see that the Amar Trade Registry has connections to Edencom that were related to, so the Edencom spending priorities during the invasions potentially connected to the Amar Trade Registry. This is really hinting at that connection between the Amar and Edencom. And it says, we all knew that Edencom was an Amar plot. In 4, we see we get introduced to this new character, which is a Serpentis subcontractor that works in Jita 4.4. In 5, you see that there is a monitoring service system that they caught. Not sure if this is really that like important for right this second. I think it comes to do with the fact that they got found in the end. But moving on, in 6, here we go. This is where things get really interesting. Serp Contact came through with something interesting, but it's got nothing to do with Firebird. Seems Upwell and PKN might be playing a double game behind the scenes when it comes to the Intaki. Hard to believe that Old Man Mordu would put up with something like that, but word is that he's got a new obsession these days, i.e. clones and all of this transmuter bullshit. I believe anything of the Forest faction and Upwell's so distributed. I believe anything of the Forest faction and Upwell's so distributed and murky, any number of players could be up to something. This is the turn to camera moment. Ready? Could be useful info down the line. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, clue, clue, right? Like, so they're saying that Upwell has connections to PKN, which is the conglomerate of Lidai, CBD, and NOH, I want to say. Hold on. CBD, Lidai, and Nogahuvi. Yeah, NOH. Nogahuvi. So what they're suggesting is PKN, the people who did the renovations of the Jita 4.4 station and created the Hypernet, and also some of the most shadiest people in the Caldari state are in bed with Upwell, which we already kind of suspected. But if you think about it, if they are playing a double game when it comes to the Intaki, well, then the growing relationship between the Caldari state and Intaki Bank, which is connected through Upwell, seems a mite bit suspicious, doesn't it? So that's going to be something to pay attention to. Yeah. Let's see. Anything else in today's post? Let's see. This one, the second and fourth note is basically just updates on the faction warfare critical zones. The fact that the Republic fleet engineering has safely removed critical materials from Egmar and Vard transmuter is very suspicious. We don't know what this materials could be. However, of course, one of the most popular theories about what's happening with these transmuters is that they're extracting Isogen 5 from the move my coffee cup aside. What'd I do? Where was I? The Isogen 5 may be, in fact, what they are extracting out of the star. So it could very well be that the Republic fleet are recovering the Isogen 5 for who knows what reason that they will actually use it for. But it's definitely worth noting. You know, they did successfully... Oh, so I don't hit it accidentally. Yeah. Thank you. It's worth paying attention to this because, you know, just like Heike Torigo briefs Caldari chief executive panels on status of Afternoon 5 research program, these two things are kind of related, right? Because this was the previous faction campaign. And as I've noted many times before, there is a relationship between the Caldari and the Amarr that is fairly secret through the agency known as Archive K, and potentially through Edencom Intelligence, because Edencom Intelligence agents, the Edencom Intelligence Agency has one of the top, or one of, you know, a high-level Amarr operative and a high-level Caldari operative. Well, I assume high-level Caldari operative, as like the #1 and #2 man of Edencom Intelligence. So there's been, you know, I've long suspected that the transmuters and Afternoon are connected, but the Caldari are trying to keep their place in all of this very quiet because they are playing a very delicate political game against the Gallente at the moment and trying to keep the Gallente looking like the bad guys. Commodity and stock markets react favorably is related to the rare ore discoveries, which I posted on the YouTubes yesterday, the world news involving that, which we will look at in just a few minutes. In fact, actually, if you look behind me right now, here, hold on. This is the new rocks, by the way, spoilers. Now, the Garistas pirates raid outlying Caldari Navy installations. There's been a lot of stuff with the Garistas and raiding stuff. I don't know if this will ever come to, you know, what kind of head this is going to come to. The Garistas have been tightly connected to all of this shit. Not only through the Tanuki, but also, as the Tanuki references in another one of her messages, that apparently Peacock was associated with one of the Garistas raids on the Caldari House of Records that involved Archive K, which is, again, that secret partnership between the Caldari and the Amarr. So, or at least that's part of what Archive K is. So, the Garistas has also been tightly connected to, you know, exposing PKN for their corruption. We're not 100% sure, like, what side they're on, so to speak. But I believe that they are against the death list for sure. Yeah. Angel Cartel mining, and then the Angel Cartel mining raids the Asylum 4. I assume that is because Asylum, let's see if we can do this. Will this work? Oh, that good. That's an actual name. I always love it when that happens. It's the most commonly occurring family name in the world. Crazy. It's in Derelict. And it's an Amatar mandate system. And it is not an AO blue star. In fact, it's not a blue star at all. Therefore, this shouldn't be connected to the transmuters. So that does actually make it kind of interesting. Especially since the new discoveries are supposed to be in border nullsec systems and in AO blue star systems, specifically in nullsec and wormhole space. So, I would need to get more information as to why this is relevant, although it is interesting that the Angel Cartel are raiding Amatar Mandate stuff when Amatar Mandate recently received a bunch of fusion reactors from Sorum gifted to Ardashapur, where Ardashapur runs, is like in control of the Amatar Mandate. For those of you who don't know, the Amatar are the Mimitar who, when the Amar enslaved the Mimitar, basically sided with the Amar. Now, it was later discovered that the Amatar mostly did that in order to protect the few remaining of the Starkmanir tribe, which were recovered during Empyrean Age. But the Amatar has been very close to the Amar. In fact, the governor of the Amatar area was recently promoted to being holder status, even though he's Amatar, which was a big controversy within the Mimitar, or within the Amar, and that's what led to Chakade talking out. Which, of course, Chakade is was an EOM operative that was secretly trying to like forward the agenda of the EOM within the Amar. Blah blah blah. This rabbit hole goes all the way down. I think I had my video speedrunning through the lore goes all into some of that stuff too. We already talked about the gang war flaring up, and Concord and Edencom officials reportedly meeting to discuss proliferation of Triglavian stellar transmuter technology. I don't know if that means that they're going to try to let it out or not. I've long since said, since the beginning, I've said that I think that the point of this whole transmuter thing is to provide opportunities for nullsec groups to modify their systems in different ways depending on star type and transmuter or whatever, right? And in fact, this new AO star ore that's appearing in nullsec could very, very, very well be the first piece of that, right? Like, so for example, one of the things that people have been noting is that these rocks that are in these new sites are very small. But what if you put a transmuter on this star, they got bigger, for example, right? Like that would be a very, expected thing to do, right? Or not expected, but like sensible, I suppose. All right. Yeah, Derelict, Ardashapur, and Amatar Mandate have all been on the radar for a while. Aaron, of course, Sorum gets involved in that. Now, all of that goes back to the reconstruction of the Amarian holder alignment, or whatever you want to call it, that was made by Empress Katis I during her second Jubilee, I want to say, when she released the Doctrine of the Two Swords and restructured the entire Navy, which I also talk about in the lore video, the speed running through the lore video, where she basically handed Tash Murkon kind of the easiest, nicest kind of territory to take care of, and ended up putting her political rivals, Sorum and Ardashapur, in a much more like tenuous situation with more territory to keep track of and whatnot. So it kind of makes sense that Ardashapur and Sorum, who I believe were not friends before, to start to align together more and more, until now we see them both basically working in sync with each other. They're even answering each other for each other in public reports, possibly connected through the Order of St. Tetramon, who are also shady AF. So, yeah, that is basically everything I've got for the news for today. Now, obviously, we now have two news articles that came out back to back, and we have the winter event starting next week, along with the new ore coming next week. So the chances of something kind of continuing to move is very, very high. So keep an eye out on the universe.eveonline.com news portal and my YouTube for any of those kinds of updates and commentary. I really want to thank everyone for watching these shows and distributing them, showing them around, and getting other people involved in the EVE lore, as it is both intensely fascinating and useful for knowing what is to come. I also want to give an extra special thanks to my following supporters: Abyssus, Arydanika the Queen, Jay Kuhn, Black Rose Noble, Dajat Lemmont, Drake, Golden Age Stories, Midnight Space Monkey, Not Just Fun, Seeds Aplenty, Serenolin with No Eyes, Syliana Vel'ash, Talking in Stations, Nephilim, Grendel, and Zaul Nex, as well as my Immortal tier supporters, Ebo1337 and Rid. Thank you all so much. And once again, I have been Ashtarothi, and until next time, I will see you in space.